Hi, family. This is Major TV News, and I have a little bit of science for you, and it's about the sun. And I know children can get a little nervous, a little squeamish when we talk about certain things that are unpredictable. So if you have children in the room, I'm going to give you a minute to take them out of the room. This might make them a little nervous, and I don't want that to happen. So I'll give you a minute. Get the kids straight. I'm using a piece from, it's called Science and Tech. And we're using this for educational purposes. So we're going to have a little conversation about it. And I'm going to roll this. But basically, what it's telling us is that there's a thing called solar winds. You ever heard of solar winds? On the sun, sunstorms. Well, these sunstorms have been getting stronger and stronger. And we're relying more and more on satellites and the internet. So this is talking about some what-ifism, but it seems like it's pretty plausible, pretty possible, that if something like that did occur, a solar type apocalypse, we would have about 13 hours before the internet would go out. Now, this might sound pretty fantastical. So I'll let these scientists and technology people explain this to us. And maybe we can learn something here together. That's what Major TV News is all about. Information for the black family and the community. Let's get some knowledge.
An internet apocalypse could ride to Earth with the next solar storm, new research warns. The sun is always showering Earth with a mist of magnetized particles, known as solar wind. For the most part, our planet's magnetic shield blocks this electric wind from doing any real damage to Earth or its inhabitants, instead sending those particles skittering toward the poles and leaving behind a pleasant aurora in their wake. But sometimes, every century or so, that wind escalates into a full-blown solar storm, and, as new research presented at the SIGCOMM 2021 Data Communication Conference warns, the results of such extreme space weather could be catastrophic to our modern way of life. In short, a severe solar storm could plunge the world into an internet apocalypse that keeps large swaths of society offline for weeks or months at a time, Sangeetha Abdou-Jayathy, an assistant professor at the University of California, Irvine, wrote in the new research paper. The paper has yet to appear in a peer-reviewed journal. To stay up to date with latest top stories, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking the button above this video. What really got me thinking about this is that with the pandemic we saw how unprepared the world was. There was no protocol to deal with it effectively, and it's the same with internet resilience, Abdou-Jayathy told Wired. Our infrastructure is not prepared for a large-scale solar event. Part of the problem is that extreme solar storms, also called coronal mass ejections, are relatively rare. Scientists estimate the probability of an extreme space weather directly impacting Earth to be between 1.6% to 12% per decade, according to Abdou-Jayathy's paper. In recent history, only two such storms have been recorded, one in 1859 and the other in 1921. The earlier incident, known as the Carrington event, created such a severe geomagnetic disturbance on Earth that telegraph wires burst into flame, and auroras, usually only visible near the planet's poles, were spotted near equatorial Colombia. Smaller storms can also pack a punch. One in March 1989 blacked out the entire Canadian province of Quebec for 9 hours. Since then, human civilization has become much more reliant on the global internet, and the potential impacts of a massive geomagnetic storm on that new infrastructure remain largely unstudied, Abdou-Jayathy said. In her new paper, she tried to pinpoint the greatest vulnerabilities in that infrastructure. The good news is, local and regional internet connections are likely at low risk of being damaged, because fiber optic cables themselves aren't affected by geomagnetically induced currents, according to the paper. However, the long undersea internet cables that connect continents are a different story. These cables are equipped with repeaters to boost the optical signal, spaced at intervals of roughly 30 to 90 miles, 50 to 150 kilometers. These repeaters are vulnerable to geomagnetic currents, and entire cables could be made useless if even one repeater goes offline, according to the paper. If enough undersea cables fail in a particular region, then entire continents could be cut off from one another, Abdu Jayathi wrote. What's more, nations at high latitudes, such as the US and the UK, are far more susceptible to solar weather than nations at lower latitudes. In the event of a catastrophic geomagnetic storm, it's those high-latitude nations that are most likely to be cut off from the network first. It's hard to predict how long it would take to repair underwater infrastructure, but Abdu Jayathi suggests that large-scale internet outages that last weeks or months are possible. In the meantime, millions of people could lose their livelihoods. The economic impact of an internet disruption for a day in the US is estimated to be over $7 billion, Abdu Jayathi wrote in her paper. What if the network remains non-functional for days or even months? If we don't want to find out, then grid operators need to start taking the threat of extreme solar weather seriously as global internet infrastructure inevitably expands. Laying more cables at lower latitudes is a good start, Abdu Jayathi said, as is developing resilience tests that focus on the effects of large-scale network failures. When the next big solar storm does blast out of our star, people on Earth will have about 13 hours to prepare for its arrival, she added. Let's hope we're ready to make the most of that time when it inevitably arrives.
Well, fam, what did y'all think? That's deep. All of a sudden there'd be some type of solar storm and knock out all the internet from country to country. And we keep talking about these bug out bags and be prepared and whatnot and so forth, but you do realize that all trade would just be done with. You couldn't use a card or a cash register or anything like that to even make purchases. So when we say be prepared, we mean be prepared. And there are some different online places that you can look about, just even through your electricity company, just little emergency preparedness. Always have a place to meet. So if the phones do go out, you guys already have something planned ahead of time, where the kids are going to meet after school, where you're going to pick them up at, where the nearest shelter might be. We don't know if this will happen in the wintertime, in the summertime. So, what's our saying? If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. This is a Callie Griot for Major TV News. Look up for the signs and the wonders in the sky.